Okay, so get ready to dive into something that I think we can all relate to, right?
Yeah.
Those tough conversations.
Yeah.
Those like really uncomfortable conversations that you have to have in relationships, like the ones you kind of want to avoid,
Right.
the we need to talk, like everybody just kind of like, oh no, what's about to happen here?
Yeah.
And you sent over this fascinating article from
Yeah.
lifearchitect.at
Mm.
about communication strategies. And it really honestly got me thinking about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into it. What was it that really stood out to you when you read this article?
Well, I think what's fascinating is that the article just kind of cuts straight to the chase and says, look, these uncomfortable conversations are just unavoidable. They're just part of life and part of
They
relationships.
are.
And, hoping that they're going to magically disappear, it's usually not the best strategy.
It's so true. It's like we think if we just ignore something long enough, it'll just go away on its own.
Right.
Spoiler alert, usually doesn't work out that way.
Exactly.
And this article uses the example of addressing a partner's weight gain, which, oh my gosh, talk about a touchy subject, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a classic example of something that can go so sideways so quickly if it's not handled delicately.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's where I think this article really does a great job because it doesn't just say, hey, this is a problem. It gives you a tactical approach, right? And the big one is swapping out you statements for I statements.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit
Yeah.
because I think we've all probably been on the receiving end of a really terribly phrased you statement.
Yeah.
So give me an example of like a cringeworthy you statement.
Okay. So let's just stick with that kind of relationship weight gain scenario.
Okay.
And imagine you say to your partner, you've gained weight, and honestly, I'm just not attracted to you anymore.
Ouch.
Yeah, right? Like, it's
Ugh,
just like, whoa, that just came out of
that sounds like
nowhere.
a relationship bomb right there.
It's a bomb.
Yeah. So that's the wrong way to do it.
Right.
Obviously, nobody should be saying that. So what's the I statement magic? Like, how do we transform that kind of conversation?
So instead, the article suggests something like this. I've been struggling lately to feel physically attracted to you, and to be honest, it worries me.
Okay.
And you can just feel the difference,
It's a
right?
completely different tone.
Completely different tone. You're not blaming, you're not shaming.
Right.
You're expressing your own feelings and concerns, which opens up, a pathway for a completely different kind of dialogue.
Instead of being on opposite sides of the ring, you're kind of coming to the table as a team to
Right.
try to figure things out together.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly it.
I like where this is going. This is good.
It's huge. And I think that's the big takeaway here with I statements. They shift the dynamic away from being accusatory to being more collaborative.
Okay.
You're no longer this like adversary, you know? You're on the same team and you're working together to find a solution.
And, one of the examples that the article gives is, like, instead of saying you never listen, which I'm sure we've all probably said that or at least thought it,
Oh, yeah.
they're like, try saying something like, I feel unheard sometimes.
Right.
And I've actually used that one before. And it's shocking how different the reaction is when you just rephrase it that way.
It really is. I mean, and I think the psychology behind it makes perfect sense, right? Like when we feel attacked, our gut instinct is to get defensive, put our guard up.
Oh, yeah.
But when you use these I statements, they create this sense of safety and understanding. It's like you're signaling to the other person, hey, I'm coming to you with vulnerability here, not blame.
Right. It's not an attack.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because you're right. It's like, why don't they teach us this stuff earlier in life? Like,
Right.
shouldn't this be relationship 101? So what are some other, like, examples of these I statement transformations?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like this could revolutionize how we talk to each other.
Oh, tons. So one of the examples that they gave in the article was taking the phrase, you're letting yourself go, which is just so harsh.
Oh, yikes.
Like nobody wants to hear that, and turning it into, I'm concerned about your health and well-being.
Nope.
It completely changes the tone of the conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it goes from being like an attack to being like you actually care about the person.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because it's not about pretending the issue doesn't exist, right? It's about approaching it with a sense of like, hey, we're in this together.
Totally. Teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say.
Okay, I love that.
What?
What other transformations did the article talk about?
Okay, this is another one of my favorites. Instead of saying, you've been in a bad mood lately, which again can feel kind of confrontational.
Yeah, nobody wants to be told they're in a bad mood.
Right, exactly. The article suggests trying something like, I've noticed you seem stressed lately and I'm worried about you.
Wow, that's so much gentler, right? Like,
Yep.
instead of putting the other person on the defensive, you're actually expressing empathy.
That's it. And that empathy is huge because it allows the other person to potentially open up about what's really going on.
And the article also talked about timing, which I think is something people don't always think
Oh,
about.
timing is everything.
Right. Like you can't just spring these types of conversations on someone and expect it to go well.
It's like trying to have a productive conversation about finances while you're on a roller coaster. It's just not going to end well.
Okay, that's a terrible idea.
Right. So, yeah, I think the article makes a really important point about choosing the right environment.
Right. Set the stage.
Exactly. Pick the right time, set the right tone. All of that matters.
So basically, not when you're both starving and exhausted after a long day.
Definitely not the ideal time for a relationship deep dive.
And it's funny because I think we've all been there. Like we know we should wait for a better time, but sometimes you just let it rip.
Oh, we're all human. Nobody's perfect at this.
The important thing is we learn from those mistakes.
Exactly. And that learning process, it ties into another really crucial point the article made. It's not just about what we say, it's about how we listen.
Okay, that's huge.
Right. Are we really listening to understand, or are we just, waiting for our turn to talk?
Oh man, that is so true.
It's so easy to fall into that track, especially when you're having a disagreement.
Oh yeah, you're just planning your next move.
Right, exactly. But when we can shift our mindset from, I need to make my point, to, I really want to understand where you're coming from, that's when the real magic starts to happen.
It's like that Brene Brown quote. Assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't.
So good. Because it's not about being right or wrong, it's about creating that space for genuine understanding.
So how do we do that? What does active listening actually look like in practice?
I think a big part of it is just being present, both verbally and non-verbally. So put your phones away, make eye contact, nod your head, all those things.
Be all there, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too.
Exactly. And try to really tune into not just the words being spoken, but also the feelings behind them.
So it's not just about listening to respond.
No, it's about listening to connect. It's about trying to see the situation through the other person's eyes, even if you don't agree with their perspective.
Right. It's like temporarily stepping into their world.
Exactly. It's about putting aside your judgments and biases, even for a moment, to try to really understand where they're coming from.
Which can be really hard, especially when you're feeling triggered.
You're preaching to the choir. Because we all have triggers. We're all human.
Totally.
And the article actually talked about this idea of shifting our perspective on conflict itself.
Oh, interesting. So not necessarily avoiding disagreements, but maybe changing how we approach those disagreements.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that conflict is a natural part of any relationship. And it can actually be an opportunity for growth.
Okay, so conflict is an opportunity instead of something to fear.
Yes. But we need the right tools to navigate it constructively, right?
Right, because if you don't have the right tools, it can just blow everything up.
Exactly. So instead of, throwing those verbal grenades we talked about earlier, we want to learn how to handle these delicate conversations with care and compassion.
It's like we're dealing with explosives. We need to be very, very careful.
It's a great analogy. And it starts with self-awareness, recognizing our own triggers, understanding what sets us off.
So we need to know ourselves first.
Exactly. It's like knowing your own personal fire alarm system.
I love that analogy. Right, like, okay, this is going to set me off, so I need to be extra careful in this situation.
Exactly. And sometimes that might mean actually taking a step back from the conversation.
Okay, so not like avoiding the conversation altogether.
No, not avoiding, but just, hitting the pause button for a minute.
Like, hey, I need a minute to process this. Can we come back to it later?
Yes, exactly. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is give each other a little bit of space.
So you're not, like, shouting at each other.
Right. Because nothing productive ever comes from that.
Ever.
Yeah.
Like 0% of the time.
And when you do come back together, that's where those active listening skills we talked about become even more important.
Because you've both had time to, like, chill out a little bit.
Exactly. So instead of just meeting anger with anger, you can actually try to understand what's underneath it.
Like, what's at the root of the problem?
Right. Because usually it's not about what you think it's about.
And that takes a lot of effort, right? To not just react defensively.
It does. But it's so worth it.
It's like we're constantly shifting gears in these conversations.
Yes. We have to be able to express our own needs and feelings, but we also have to be able to truly hear what our partner is saying.
It's a delicate balance.
It is. It's like a dance.
Oh, I like that. A relationship dance.
Right. And like any good dance, it takes two.
And when you find that rhythm, it's amazing.
Absolutely. It can be pure magic.
You know, the article ended on this really thought-provoking question.
Okay, what was it?
It asked if learning these communication skills, and especially using I statements, could actually be the key to a deeper level of intimacy in relationships.
Wow.
It's interesting, right? Because we usually think about communication as a way to solve problems.
Right, like to stop arguments before they happen.
Yeah. But what if it goes even deeper than that?
What if it actually changes the whole foundation of how we connect with each other?
Yeah. Like, what if it could transform our relationships in ways we never even imagined?
Because when we feel safe enough to be vulnerable with
To
someone,
let them see the real us?
yeah, all of it, that's when we create space for true intimacy.
And I statements can be such a powerful tool for that.
They can, because it's like you're saying, hey, this is me, this is how I feel,
And you're not afraid to show that?
right? You're not hiding anymore.
This has been such a great conversation.
Me too. I always love our deep dives.
And we only have so much time.
There's always more to explore.
But I feel like this has given me so much to think about.
Same here. And the best part is that this is an ongoing process.
Oh, 100%.
It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up and being willing to learn and grow.
And being willing to put in the effort, because relationships take work.
They do, but it's the best kind of work, isn't it?
It is. When you find your person, it's worth it.
And, to everyone listening, we hope this has given you some new ways of thinking about those tough conversations.
Because they don't have to be so scary.
Exactly. In fact, they can be an opportunity to deepen your connection with the people you love.
Beautifully said. Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Until next time.
Keep those conversations flowing, everybody.